I'm Bob at I Like to Make Stuff, and it's almost time for Halloween. Now usually I'll just put on a helmet, wear some street clothes, and walk around with my kids while they trick or treat. But this year we were joking that it would be really funny if I was a bobblehead. Which reminded me that I've always wanted to make Optimus Prime's head full size. So today we're gonna make his head full size that I can wear. Let's give it a shot. Now, if you know me at all, you know that I love Transformers, and I really like Optimus Prime. One of these days, I'd love to build his entire body full size, but the head is a more reasonable way to start. So that's what we're gonna do. So I've gotta figure out how to make this thing the actual size, but also make it wearable. It's gotta be something that I can wear out trick-or-treating with my kids. And so we've got two big problems to solve. One, how big is it? And two, how do I make it so that I can wear it? So the first problem to figure out is how big does the head need to be? Luckily, I can't get this wrong because he doesn't exist.
What?
But the way that I figured it out is to take a picture of Optimus Prime into Photoshop, and I measured the proportion of his head to his body. It turns out that his head is 9% of his entire body height. After that, I have to figure out how tall Optimus actually is, and depending on the cartoons or the comics that you're looking at, he's 19 feet or 22 feet or 28 feet. We're gonna go with 22 feet. And once you've got this, it's really easy to figure out that number. You multiply across and then divide, and that gives you the number here. And it's about 1.98 feet. So his head needs to be just under 2 feet tall. So the next problem is, how do we make a head that's that big that I can wear? Obviously, this thing's gotta be light enough to wear. So no metal, no wood. It's gotta be something that's paper or plastic based. I thought about using some styrene, but the stuff I have is great. It's too flexible, it won't hold the shape. Paper would be the same problem, so I think cardboard is a pretty good way to get started. So with cardboard in mind as the material, I needed to start designing, but rather than doing it myself, I found a really fantastic template which introduced me to something new for me, Pepakura. Now, if you're not familiar, Pepakura is basically like paper craft. It's taking flat, two-dimensional papers, folding them, taping them, gluing them into three-dimensional shapes. So you start out with some templates like this, you cut them out, and then you fold them and glue them together. And luckily, I was able to find a really fantastic template for Optimus Prime's head on Etsy, and it was very inexpensive. I'll put a link to it down in the description if you want to get it as well. It comes with all of the templates that you need, a few images, it's written in another language, so I think we could figure it out, but I don't really have a whole lot of instruction to go on. Now these templates are great, but they're still too small. I need this thing to be a lot bigger. So basically I took one of the shapes that was visible in my picture and did the same math that I did before, measuring this template and measuring that picture, and found out that these needed to be scaled up 205%. Luckily, that was super easy to do on the computer. Once you've got these, you can print them out and use them as templates or the paper themselves. You cut them out and you're good to go. But since this is big and I have a big laser, I'm gonna take advantage of it. Now this was incredibly fast and easy to do because the template was already a vector. I brought it right into Lightburn, scaled it up 205%, and just cut everything out. And not only could I actually cut out all the shapes easily, I actually was able to put in score lines where they need to be folded, and it didn't cut all the way through. I used the laser because it was handy, but typically Pepakura paper crafts are done with an X-Acto knife. A really sharp blade and a straight edge is really all you need, even if you're working at big scale. I also wanted to point out that I have absolutely zero experience with papercraft or Pepakura, but that's never stopped me before. So I've got a bunch of cut pieces, I've got glue, I've got tape, I've got instructions. See what happens. This video is brought to you by the Maker Alliance, which is an awesome community of people that support I Like to Make Stuff and get a bunch of exclusive content. They get videos that nobody else sees. They get to see all the project videos early. They get monthly hangouts and free plans and a bunch of other stuff. If you want to find out more about the Maker Alliance, go to ILikeToMakeStuff.com/join and check it out. Okay, I'm like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours in, not very far. And look at this. This thing is coming together so well, and even scaling this thing up, the template, I was worried that some of the slots would be wrong, but everything actually fits perfectly, even with the thickness of the material. So this is where we're at. I have one side completely done, except for the kind of front areas, but a lot of this stuff I'm gonna have to end up covering up later on so that you don't see the corrugations, so I'm not super worried about it. But this is going very well, which is usually famous last words, but we'll see. Check this out. His head is pretty much done. I mean, as far as the cardboard. That template was fantastic. I couldn't read the instructions because they were in another language, but I didn't need to. So kudos to that designer. He did a really good job. Again, I'll link those down in the description if you want to check them out. So this right here is, as far as I've planned, the only planning I really did was to get the template, make it out of cardboard, and then I was just gonna figure it out. So from here on out, we are winging it completely. The next thing I have to do is seal this up. I don't want to put any kind of wet paint or anything on this cardboard until it's sealed because it's going to make all of this surface wrinkle up. I don't want to deal with that, so I need to seal it. I'm going to probably do that with Mod Podge, but apparently there's several different things you could use. Shellac, lacquer, some other stuff. Mod Podge seems to be a good option, so we're going to do that. And then afterwards, I have to figure out how to seal up all of these open cardboard corrugations. I've never actually used Mod Podge before, but it's listed as a glue sealer and finish, so I think it's gonna be the thing to do here. Basically, I wanna seal up the surface so that the surface of the cardboard won't absorb any of the water from the paints or anything else that I use later on. And I think once I have this down, it will actually give me a surface to be able to put on some spackle or some other thing to fill in these gaps, which then I'll have to sand down. Really, this is just the first step to kind of protect the work that I've done so far. This is going very well. Even though this is supposed to be a sealer, it's definitely still wet enough that it's causing the cardboard to kind of dimple up, and right on the faceplate, which is kind of the big thing that you're gonna see. So that's unfortunate. The next thing I think I'm gonna try is actually to take some spray lacquer and spray it in really light coats on the outside, maybe on the back, to test it out and see if I can start to spray and build up a surface rather than wetting the current surface to see if I can seal it that way. Spray lacquer's the ticket. Light coats, it goes on, it doesn't ripple the surface, and once you get it coated and it dries, which happens really quickly, you can do as many coats as you need. So here's what I have to do. I've got all of these spaces where the cardboard didn't meet up, and I've got all these corrugated edges that I need to cover. So I'm gonna do that in two ways, or at least I'm gonna try with two ways. One is to cover a lot of these faces that have exposed corrugations with a really thin styrene sheet. This is a very thin plastic that you can cut with a utility knife, and so I'm gonna try my best to cut some shapes to cover these up and add some detail in the process. Then anything that's still exposed, like these seams right here, I'm gonna go over with spackle. Spackle is water-based, so it does cause the paper to wrinkle a little bit, so hopefully with the lacquer on here that won't be a huge issue. And also, I'm using spackle instead of like an acrylic body filler like I would on a 3D printed prop because I won't have to sand quite as hard, which means I won't tear up the cardboard as easily, theoretically. So styrene is awesome stuff to work with. If you get it thin, you can easily cut it, bend it around shapes, you can trim it with a knife, you can even sand sharp corners. This is great stuff, and it helped me to cover up all the corrugated surfaces and to actually just make some of the big surfaces smoother. So now this thing is ready to get some spray primer. Now I'm gonna do the filler primer just like I would if this were 3D printed. It'll help unify all the surfaces, and it's super sandable, it dries really quickly. I'm not gonna flood this quite as much as I would with a 3D print because I don't wanna add too much moisture at one time, just like before. The paint on this thing really made it pop for me. I think it looks awesome, and it's getting close, but it's not quite done yet. There's two big things that I still have to finish. One is not wearable. It's way too big, it sits on my shoulders, and so I've got to build something on the inside to hold it off of my head, but we'll get to that in a minute. The other thing is this eye area. This can't stay open. It needs to be covered up, and I would like to be able to see through it if possible, and I think I've got an idea. I know that there's some vision mesh or eye mesh that people will use for costumes. I can't get that locally, but at the local fabric store, I did find this utility cloth. It's kind of a loose mesh, you can see through it, and it's not super soft, but I think it'll actually work to make a solid panel. Now if I hold this up over the lens, you can still see through it. And when I hold it up to me, I can actually see through it pretty well, even through 2 layers. So if I need to use 2 layers to really obscure the inside of the mask, it'll work. And I think it'll take paint, but we gotta test it. That dye was just stuff I had around the house. I don't know if it's gonna work. I don't know if it's the right kind of dye. So while it's in the little pot over there, I went to the store to get some RIT dye. I know this stuff will work and it's my fallback. But while I was there, I also found some fabric spray paint, which is not something I knew existed, but I tested it out and it actually worked really well. Something about the spray doesn't clog up the fabric, and so you don't have any spots that you can't see through, and it still got it dark enough to do the job. I also found something else that actually might work just fine and be a lot faster to do. It's this black plastic grid for some sort of a needle craft. And the grid is open enough that you can still see through it quite a bit, but if you take 2 pieces of it and you offset those grids, you can actually move them back and forth to get a different amount of kind of see-throughness. So I'm gonna start playing with this as an option while I'm waiting on the dye, and if it works, I'm just gonna go with this. I think 1 layer is probably pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and do 1, and then if I need to add another layer behind it, I can later. That stuff actually works out really awesome. I'm gonna completely abandon the fabric and dye idea. This stuff worked great. It's really easy to cut and you can fold it. Plus, you can paint it. I did some test spray painting on it, worked out great. So covering up the eyes is done. The next big thing is figuring out how to wear this. The way I'm planning on doing that is with this thing. It's basically a replacement part for the inside of a welding helmet. This is the part that wraps around your head. It's adjustable so you can make it fit you, but then it's got mounting points for you to put the helmet on top of. I got these a long time ago as a platform to build prop helmets on top of, and I've never actually gotten to try it. So I think this is gonna work out fine. I've just gotta figure out how to attach these 2 points on the sides to the inside of Optimus's head. This seemed like an easy thing to do, but I can't quite figure out how to attach anything to this tiny little nub. On a welding helmet, there's a little plastic inset for this little nub to go into, and that locks the 2 pieces together. I don't have that here. So I've got to figure out a way to grab this, but then extend out to reach some part of the inside of the head. He's almost finished. He needs one more thing, eyes. And so I tried a couple of different things between the cartoon and the comic book. This one actually looks better, but it was really easy to prototype these with some scrap styrene because you can cut and trim and fold and bend and then throw away and do it again pretty easily. Now that I've got these, I could just glue them on, but it'd be way cooler if they glowed. And that led me to this. This is an EL panel. It's battery powered, and when you turn this on, this will light up. And it'll light up kind of a whitish color unless you put a film over it, and then it looks like this. The really cool thing about these, even though they're not super bright, is that they're flexible and you can cut them down to the shape that you need. I say that they're super bright. I really want to point that out. They are not very bright at all. This is currently turned off, and if I turn it on, you can just barely see it change. There's another setting here where it'll flash. And so you can kind of see how much it's changing between on and off. So in a well-lit room, this is not going to do much except just look blue. But outside, as the sun's going down, this will actually be perfect. I love the way that this thing turned out. It looks fantastic. And to be honest, making it out of foam board would have probably been the exact same amount of work but it would look better because it wouldn't have all the corrugations in the surface. And I think you can still cut it on a laser. But the important thing is whether it's gonna be comfortable to wear on Halloween, and I can unequivocally say yes. Most of the time when you wear helmets, they fog up, it's hard to hear people, it's hard for people to hear you, they get really uncomfortable, and none of those things are the case with this guy. There's plenty of visibility except for right down in front of me, which is not a huge deal. I can hear everybody, they can hear me, there's plenty of airflow, it's a fantastic thing to wear, so I might actually just start wearing it all the time. Honestly, I can do pretty much anything in this helmet. If you'd like to see a project video of me wearing this the entire time, let me know down in the comments. If you've got some other ideas for actual size props or costumes, leave them in the comments, because I might do it. That's it for this one. Thanks for watching. Now it's time for bloopers. Okay, so that didn't take very long, and what was really cool about it, usually I will just put on a helmet, wear some street clothes, and walk around. That stuff actually worked out awesome. I'm totally completely, and it's got mounting points so you can put the welding helmet or whatever, welding helmet.